to the What Even Is podcast, where we interview experts about different topics that makes us wonder, what even is that? Or what even is that like? I'm your host, Donna Trung. Let's get started. Today we're answering What Even Is Astrology, Part 1, where we talk about the 12 zodiac signs and different trends of the planets with astrologer, psychic medium, and reiki-certified Jessica D'Angio. We're just going to start with the general question of what is astrology?
Okay. So astrology, the way that I like to explain it to people is astrology is basically the study of energy patterns. There's kind of a very fierce debate that rages about, what is it? How does it work? Right. There's a lot of people who think that it's basically bonkers to think that, the planets kind of control what's going on here on Earth. And I don't really buy into that. I have seen it more. The idea I think behind it that's a little bit more digestible for me is that I've seen the analogy of like a clock, right? Like you look at a clock on the wall and it says it's 10 past 2. It's not 10 past 2 because the clock says it's 10 past 2. Like the clock is just kind of reflecting a greater trend, right? That I think is very similar to how astrology works, right? Like COVID isn't here right now because Saturn and Pluto conjoined each other back in January. However, the fact that conjunction happened is indicative of a much bigger trend. And one of the things that tends to come along with that trend is pandemics, mass illness, and, unfortunately, mass casualty events. And so, that's kind of, to me, a little bit easier to kind of understand, because when you try to talk cause and effect with people about astrology, people really, there's not a whole lot of people who are like on the fence about it. I think people either really discount it and think it's BS, or there are people who have experienced it enough and kind of see like, okay, I don't know how this works, but it clearly does. And so, that's it.
Yeah. Okay, so getting for people to understand what we were talking about, the Pluto and Saturn conjunction, can you explain like the different trends that you've seen when you were researching, just so then they understand more what you're talking about?
Sure. Yep. So Saturn and Pluto are two of the more outer planets, and they can join each other approximately every 35 to 40 years. So it varies because Pluto has that kind of wonky orbit. Now, when I say conjunction, it's funny because there are words that come up in astrology that don't really come up anywhere in the English language. And so I use these words all the time, but I take for granted sometimes people have no idea what I'm talking about. So when I say conjunction, what that means is that two or more planets are basically sitting at the same degree of the zodiac at the same time. Back in January, both Saturn and Pluto reached the 22 degree mark of Capricorn. That's both where both of them have been transiting for kind of a while now. Pluto's taken a sweet time. He's been in Capricorn since like 2008. Saturn just got there a few years ago, and he's thankfully almost done. But they did meet up in January at 22 degrees. And so this is, a relatively predictable cycle. Like I said, it happens about every, say, 38 years. We had one of these back in the early 1980s. We had one in the early 1940s, and kind of, so on. You could just go back and see it. Saturn stands for, he kind of is rules, limits, authority. He's the principle of contraction. And Pluto just really kind of intensifies everything that he touches. So when these two meet up, and they're both considered to be malefic planets. So what that means is that left to their own devices, the effects that they kind of generate are almost always going to be perceived by humanity as, quote unquote bad, right? This is another thing. I don't really buy into the whole like good, bad, right? Some astrologers are very kind of bifurcated in that way. I'm of the belief that, energy can kind of manifest in an infinite number of ways. So you can choose that, like perception shapes reality, right? Like if you choose to see all these transits as happening, to you as bad, then yeah, you're going to have a bad experience. But, challenge gives rise to growth. And so, there's always a positive way to spin it. But so these two planets meeting up is almost never a good thing. It ultimately causes transformation, but it's kind of like the means of achieving that transformation are usually perceived and experienced by humanity as not so pleasant. So some of the things that we see during these conjunction years and kind of a couple of years on either side of them is this massive push towards contraction, right? So pulling back. Major trends towards more conservatism. This plays out in lots of different ways. We're seeing it now kind of politically and kind of all over the world, but it can result in fights over resources are pretty common to see, mass casualty events, illness, sicknesses, death. I had said when we first started talking, like the most recent one that we experienced in the 1980s, early 1980s, gave rise to the AIDS epidemic. There was one that happened in the I want to say it's the one that happened in the very, very early 1900s. The year is blank. I'm blanking on the year that one was, but I want to say that was actually when the first synthetic opiates were created. Right. So now here we are almost 100 years later, having experienced a few of them. And we have like the opiate epidemic kind of raging. Right. So you see these kind of punctuated things that occur across society. And it's interesting because sometimes, a seed will be planted during one conjunction, and then all of a sudden that seed has grown into like a full Little Shop of Horrors type flower by another conjunction 40 or even 80 years later. Right. Like it just kind of simmers below the surface, and then when we have another conjunction, like boom, all of a sudden it's kind of this huge problem. So not these are planets that have existed for billions of years potentially, right? We don't even know. And so 80 years is a long time for a human life, but it's kind of a drop in the bucket in terms of the cosmos. So
right,
to see these things kind of playing out over time, throughout recorded history even is very fascinating.
Right. And even in the 1940s, because I'm thinking like the World War II, the Holocaust.
Yep. Yeah. All of the war is actually quite a big theme that comes up when you go back and look at at these particular conjunctions. Like you said, so the conjunction happens when the two planets meet at the same degree, and then what happens is at the conjunction we end one cycle and start a new one. So the planets continue to transit, and then relatively regularly, say like every 10 years, they're going to form, they're going to make, Saturn will make it another kind of 90 degrees away, because Pluto's the way slower mover of the two. So it's really Saturn that cycles around Pluto. So every 20-ish years, we have the opposition, which is when Saturn and Pluto are 180 degrees opposite each other in the sky. And those are no fun either, right? Oppositions tend to be culmination points, right? So seeds that get planted during the conjunction can often, kind of culminate and explode into something, not so fun by the time the opposition happens. So, the world wars definitely track that, right? So we had, I think it was, I want to say World War I broke out during one of the oppositions. World War II was simmering kind of in between. And then by the time they met up again for the conjunctions that happened in the early 1940s, World War II was basically on like Donkey Kong, right? So, now here we are in the 1980s. It was not as obvious, but we had the escalation of the Cold War, right? So the Cold War is early 80s is when that became, kind of a household word, something that people understood was happening. And now here we are 40 years later, and it's, who knows, right? We feel like we're on the brink of World War III, potentially a civil war here in the United States. I mean, it's anybody's guess how it's going to play out. Hopefully it doesn't get that, that crazy, but who knows, 20 years from now, we may look back at this period and be like, yeah, like we here in America were actually in a war, and we just didn't recognize it as such because things have just changed, right?
Right.
Like, I don't think wars nowadays, I guess, are probably not going to be fought the way that they were fought back in the 1940s. I mean, technology and everything else has just changed so rapidly. So
yeah, there's like cyber war.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and wars, I mean, it's wars on ideas. It's yeah, we're also, I mean, there are so many planetary cycles. Like this is just one, right? And it's an amazing time to be alive from an astrological standpoint, because there are so many other even bigger cycles kind of ending and starting. Like we're transitioning into the age of Aquarius. This is like this is like a 2,000-year cycle, as opposed to like, we're talking a 40-year, right? So, and that's,
Interesting.
yeah, right. We're also, we're starting a new 200-year cycle between the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction. It's absolutely crazy how many different cycles are converging kind of at this particular moment in time. So it's, in terms of moving away from, kind of the earth plane, right? The earth element where everything's kind of fought in the three-dimensional reality. We're moving into more of an air paradigm with the age of Aquarius. Aquarius is an air sign. And so, we really do kind of see, that happening, right? Attacks on information, attacks on ideas, as opposed to like actual physical attacks on people. There's plenty going on here in the 3D reality as well, because like I said, we're kind of still in that transition phase. So Earth is still kind of holding on, air is kind of taking over, but so we're in that sweet spot in the middle where it's, air is where we're heading, but we haven't gotten out of the earth paradigm by any stretch of the imagination. We're still dealing with that.
Interesting. So I feel like a lot of that stuff went over my head because I don't understand a lot of stuff yet.
Yeah, we kind of jumped in at the deep end of the pool.
Okay, so let's start with the easier stuff.
Right.
So easier stuff, what are the 12 zodiac signs? And also, do you have a favorite? Are you allowed to say that as an astrologer?
So there are no hard and fast rules. I personally am an Aquarius sun, and so we say what we want, and we kind of don't really care what anyone else thinks about that. That's one of the beauties of Aquarius. I definitely have signs that I vibe with a little better than others, but I have done this long enough and I have done charts for enough people to know that there is duality in everything, right? In all the signs. So there are, wonderful things that every sign brings to the table, and there are terrible things that every sign brings to the table. And it's really, it's very individualized. A person gets to choose where they operate. The other thing too, in Western astrology, there's kind of this unfortunate overemphasis on sun sign, right? Mm-hmm. Like as if, knowing where your sun is definitely important, right? It's a very important piece of the puzzle, but it's just one piece. All of the planets in the zodiac are somewhere when you were born. And it really is like the whole of the chart that creates a person. Now the sun is I don't even want to say it's the most important piece. It's really just the most visible piece of a person, but there's so much other stuff going on that can kind of alter, how that sun sign presents. So very important to kind of know, because it's different signs interact differently with each other. Right. And so it's, one that I love to use. I know, are you a Gemini? I haven't asked what's your sun
That's
sign?
my moon sign.
Your moon. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I actually don't mind Gemini moon. Gemini, I have a really hard time with Gemini sun people. And so I joke around all the time about how I love to hate Geminis. Right.
Right.
And P.S. like, I have 4 kids. I have two different dads. Both of them were Geminis. My childhood best friend was a Gemini, right? So like, this isn't something that I just like willy-nilly decided I hated Geminis. Like I have a very long track record of like really trying to make things work with Geminis and just having a really hard time doing it. But it wasn't until I got into astrology and kind of understood why that is, because as an Aquarius, Gemini is an air sign, right? Aquarius is an air sign. So the air signs, and Libra is the 3rd air sign, right? So, we get along very well, right? Same with like the water signs, the earth signs, like we tend to flock towards people who we sense, that camaraderie with. And it's interesting because even like as young children, all my kids are water signs. They all flock towards other water signs long before they were, ever aware that astrology was even a thing. So Geminis love me, and like, I'm very attracted to them too. But the problem is that I am Virgo rising, and I have a big 6th house stellium, which, is a complicated way of saying that I have a lot of Virgo type energy in my chart. Virgo and Gemini square each other, right? So it's a tension aspect. So while my Aquarius attracts them, my Virgo kind of repels them. And so these two energetic things are happening at the same time. Whenever I meet a Gemini, it's like, oh, I love you, but I hate you. And I love you, but I hate you. So like, and this is just an example from my own life. There are like hundreds of ways that this can present for any other person, depending on what their signs are, what they attract, how that attraction factor kind of meshes, with whoever they're meeting at the time. So it's amazingly complex, and it's fascinating, right? I love, one of my favorite things to do is chart couples, to kind of see, like, people come to me all the time and they're like, oh, well, I'm an Aquarius sun and he's a Gemini sun. Like, are we compatible? And it's like,
Well, because it
I don't
has like the
know.
other parts of your chart, your birth chart
There's
too,
so much
right?
more. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, to comparing two charts is a lot. And so, yeah, like there's sun sign compatibility if you both have the sun in air signs, but like, what's his moon, right? Like, what's that, how does
Yeah,
all this stuff, because when you're in a relationship with somebody, you see a lot more than just their sun sign, right? The sun is
for
actually a
sure.
very superficial part of people. It's the part that we readily show to everyone, but like the moon isn't, or our Venus or Mars, or, the personal planets that definitely come into play more when you're in like a romantic relationship with somebody versus, just a superficial, like, oh, okay, I'm going to show you who I am kind of on the surface, but you're not going to get any deeper than that.
Right.
Okay. So I think you asked me, what are the 12 signs?
Yeah.
Okay. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces.
Right.
Was
So
that
then,
12? Like,
yeah, I wrote
I
them
don't,
down, so I was like following through. Yeah.
okay, I got
And
it.
you
Awesome.
got it in the
I
right order
passed.
too. Yeah.
Nice. Yes. So the zodiac wheel. So we have a 360-degree circle, right? This is very, very simple geometry. It divides down into the 12 signs. Every sign has 30 degrees. They start at 0 and end at 29, so there's no 30th degree of any sign, but the math works out. And then we can further so it's 12 signs. We can further divide them down a couple of different ways. So there's 4 elements. We have fire, water, earth, air. So there's 3 of each of those. And then we have what's called the qualities, which are cardinal, mutable, and fixed. So in every, so say, for example, with the fire signs, we have 3 fire signs, which are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So those guys all have fire in common, but they're also different because Aries is the cardinal fire, Leo is the fixed fire, and Sagittarius is the mutable fire. And that same kind of grouping and categorizing goes on in every one of the elements. So air, water, and earth all have the same thing. And that's, kind of, a lot of people don't know this, but the natural zodiac, so it starts at Aries and ends at Pisces. For some strange reason, we start our calendar year in the middle of Capricorn season, right? I don't entirely know why that is the case, but the astrological new year starts when the sun moves into Aries every year, which happens in the second third of March. So usually around, I think it's like March 23rd, right? I think that's usually when it happens. So that's the spring equinox. The zodiac, the sun, it actually tracks the seasons. So the 4 cardinal signs, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, the sun moves into those signs every time a new season starts.
I
right?
see.
So that's how and this is kind of how you remember which, what does it mean to be a cardinal sign? What does it mean to be a fixed sign? What does it mean to be a mutable sign? You just pay attention to kind of what the sun is doing, what the seasons are doing during those times, and you can see. So cardinal signs are known for leadership. They're very pioneering. They initiate projects, right? So the sun moves into the cardinal signs whenever a new season starts. Then they're always followed by the fixed signs, which are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, right? So the fixed signs are the signs that the sun moves through when the season's in full swing, right? It has full momentum. There's no variation, right? It's either, in Leo, it's summer, summer, summer. Right now we're in Scorpio season. It is very much fall, right? There's not a whole, well, with the exception of the freak snowstorm we got the other day, there's not a whole lot of variation on the theme, right? It's just autumn right now. And then the mutable signs, which are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, those are the signs that the sun moves through as the seasons are transitioning. So the mutable signs are known for kind of tying up loose ends and kind of concluding things and transitioning them over to whatever is, going to be the next project that we start. So it's, it goes cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable, all the way around the zodiac. And we just repeat every year. We just repeat.
Um, this brings up another question, but I do want you to go over like the different qualities of each sign, what like they're known for. So
Okay.
like starting with Aries. Okay, this is what I know about Aries. They're very fiery, they're
Yep.
short-tempered,
Yep.
they get mad easily.
Yes, they do.
And they're I think they're kind of sensitive, honestly. But they instead of being like a Cancer, I'm a Cancer.
Okay. I have a
So
Cancer moon. So
oh, nice.
yep. Yep.
So with Aries, instead of like crying, they just get like mad.
Yeah,
That's just,
temper.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because so Aries, I love Aries people. Aries and Aquarius go very well together. It's fire. So the fire signs and the air signs tend to do well together. Fire feeds air. And the earth signs and the water signs tend to do very well together. The earth and water are considered to be feminine, more passive yin type energy versus the air and fire, which are masculine yang outward kind of facing energy, right? So that's why they're compatible. As a practical matter, everybody has a little bit of something in their chart and we all make it work.
right,
All, however it has to happen. So it's not to say that if you're, all air and earth, you're doomed, you're going to have a terrible life, right? People just figure it out. But, there are ways to kind of work around that energy. So Aries people, yes, they tend to be very self-centered, right? And when I say self-centered, I usually try to temper it because there's kind of a negative connotation to saying self-centered, but Aries is the sign of self. It is the first sign in the zodiac, right? And the zodiac really represents the continuum of a human life, birth through death. So Aries being the first house is literally where the soul kind of enters, right? Enters the arena of Earth School. And so when I say self-centered, what I mean is it really is the sign where the soul becomes aware of itself, right? It has a body, it's kind of here. Aries people metaphorically kind of, they embody that energy very much. So a lot of times what happens with Aries is that they have a hard time seeing past the nose on their face, right? Which can present as good and bad, right? They are really good at teaching people how to put self first, because you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And one of the good things about them being, kind of so short is that they really don't hold grudges. That's one of the beautiful things about my, people that I know who are Aries friends. Like, yeah, they'll blow up and they have a temper and they just kind of go nuts. But once it's done, it's done. Like once their fire kind of spends itself, they're just kind of like, all right, they don't, they're not going to sit and beat a dead horse. They're just like, okay, we're done. Let's move on to the next thing. So that's cardinal fire, and it's a spark, right? It is just kind of like the life force that just, right, it burns, and then it's up to kind of the rest of the zodiac to then take that spark and carry it through.
Yeah, I didn't even think of it that way. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly. I mean, and that's kind of, each sign has its job. And so it's funny because if you start somewhere in the middle, like with a Virgo, it's contextually, it can be hard for people, but when you pay attention to the entire zodiac as one continuum, you see how each sign kind of builds upon whatever the last one was doing, until you get to Pisces, which embodies everything, right? All of the signs are kind of, they all mishmash together in Pisces. So that's kind of what happens.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So then next is Taurus. Taurus is fixed earth. So Taurus is second house. It's about resources, material resources, right? So in Aries, we kind of learned that we have a body, right? I have hands, I have this, I have that, I exist. And then in Taurus, it becomes about, okay, now how do I keep this body alive, right? What do I need to survive? So Tauruses are very, very kind of fixed on the material plane, right? They can be decadent. They love food, right? They really live through their five senses. They're not afraid to put in hard work because they know that, that they need to gather resources to survive and hopefully to thrive, right? Like that's really kind of the goal. So Taurus is kind of all about, it's considered to be a money house. But I like to kind of give the caveat that the reason it's considered to be a money house is really because, again, in Western society, we've evolved to an extent where money is necessary to survive, right? But you could, in theory, take the money out of it and still have a whole lot going on in the Taurus section of the chart. So it's all about kind of just having whatever you need, right? A roof over your head, a value, and it's tangible and intangible things, right? So it's really kind of easy to conceptualize the tangible things that we need to eat, right? A place to sleep, food, clothes, right? Shelter. But Taurus also covers things like the more intangible things, like our value system and our talents and our self-esteem, all of those things that we rely on, kind of subconsciously without realizing it, to increase our resource base, right? So, Taurus really covers kind of anything that we uniquely bring to the table that is ours and that we use to kind of survive out there in the world. So that's Taurus. Gemini, house number 3, the one I love to hate, right? So Gemini is the first time that the air sign gets introduced. Gemini's mutable air. And air is all about ideas and communication. So it's the realm of the mind. All of the air signs take us to the realm of the mind. They just do so in slightly different ways. So Gemini is the first time that the soul kind of understands, okay, I have a body, I have stuff. Oh my God, I can think, right? I can, and now all of a sudden this kind of whole new world opens up for the soul, because this brings us into the realm of imagination and socialization, right? The air signs are known for being very social. And so Gemini's job is, all the jobs are unique. Gemini, I think, has one of the more interesting ones. If you know any Geminis, or you said you have a Gemini moon, so you'll get this a little bit. Gemini's job in the wheel is to information gather. Not necessarily to do anything with that information, right? That kind of comes later. Gemini's job is to just take it all in, right? Because it's like kid in a candy store type energy, right? All of a sudden you see that, like, oh, there's this like whole realm of ideas out there, and Gemini can't get enough. So people with heavy Gemini are really just like information junkies. They are constantly wanting to read and learn and talk and socialize and be out and about. Like it's very, very, I liken it to a tornado, right? Mutable air, because it's just, right? It just whips around all the time, and it kind of just wants to collect everything. It doesn't have any idea what it wants to do with all that information. It
just wants the information.
It just wants it, right? It knows that there are more jobs to be done down the line with the information. It's just that Gemini doesn't have any responsibility to actually do any of those jobs. It's just collecting the information for further use. So the energy can definitely get a little bit chaotic with Gemini. Focus is not always a strong suit, right? So like, and that's one of the reasons I think, we were joking around before about why I attract Aquarians in general, tend to really attract Geminis, is because Aquarius is fixed air. Right? So we are, every bit as intelligent as the Gemini, but we are able to kind of focus in one place. Some say we focus a little too much and we become too stubborn and fixed in our ideas, but it's a very good pairing when you get the two of us together, because they kind of whip around and we're like, okay, let's focus this down a little bit. But yeah, so that's basically what Gemini does. And then Cancer, this gets us to the 4th house. Cancer is the first time that water appears. So Cancer is cardinal water. Cancer is considered to be the foundation of the entire chart. So again, we're talking about a human life, right? So, we're born in Aries, we have stuff in Taurus, we have a mind in Gemini. And when we get to Cancer, we learn that we have an emotional body, right? It's the first time that feelings make an appearance.
Oh, is that why they're so emotional?
Yes, yes, right? So Cancer is the sign of the mother. It is the sign of the subconscious, right? The base of our foundation. It represents the time of life when we are most impressionable, right? Young children. So the first 3 signs, we kind of zip through those 3 signs in like the first 2 years of life, maybe the first 3 years of life. But when we get to kind of that sweet spot, right, before we have any type of ego, before we understand that, our emotional body is something that we need to learn how to regulate, we hang out in the Cancer area of our lives. And, this is kind of where our parents make or break us, to be perfectly honest. And so, and even if you don't have any Cancer in your chart, like everybody has Cancer somewhere in their chart. They may not have any planets there, but, everybody who lives to be a certain age goes through that kind of Cancer period of life, early childhood, and the development. And this is, again, this is kind of where the subconscious starts to develop. And the subconscious rules upwards of 90% of human behavior, right? Which is kind of scary when you think about it. This is really the time of life when it starts to form, right? When we get programmed, when without even realizing it, we are constantly taking in, information about the behaviors of our parents or our caretakers or whoever's around us when we're children, and kind of filing it for later, right? And then as we age and we become adults, 4, 5, 6% of what we do is actually conscious, and the rest of it comes from the subconscious programming that we received during the Cancer area of life. So cancers in general are considered to be very nurturing, very mothering, right? Whether they have children or not is kind of irrelevant, because they just bring that energy to everything that they do. They're fiercely protective, very, very empathetic. And often, and I say we because, like I said, I have a Cancer moon, we're perceived to be very moody. And a lot of what happens there is because we are so empathetic, we pick up the emotional energy of others without meaning to. And so all of a sudden we can be kind of cruising along on any given day and be like, oh, I'm really happy. And then we get around somebody who's in a crappy mood. And like all of a sudden we're just like, oh God, I don't, and
Yeah.
people around us don't get it. They're like, what just happened? And you're like, I don't know. But we're super sensitive, right? Crying is definitely a big kind of Cancer theme. We kind of wear our hearts on our sleeves, and that if you think about what makes a good mother, it is her ability to empathize and kind of look ahead and anticipate what are the needs of her children going to be, right? Because her whole job is to like, okay, this child's going to get hungry, this child's going to get tired, I'm going to do everything in my power, to kind of prevent this child from melting down and having a bad experience, right? So Cancers are gifted with that ability to do that kind of for everything, right? So we really do, kind of put forward that emotional energy and like anticipate, what are the needs going to be of the people around us. The potential downside to that is that we are such caretakers that a lot of times we don't take care of ourselves. We forget the Aries lesson, which is self first, right?
Right.
We're so busy caring about everybody else. And so that's why I say it's like, when you have a lot of energy, like for you saying Cancer, sometimes it can be really hard to remember, if you don't have anything going on in the Aries sector of your chart, then it's like, okay, if you're getting burnt out because you're taking care of too many people, you have to go back to the Aries section and be like, okay, I need to remember that I need to put myself first, because I'm not really going to be of any help to the people around me if I'm not taking care of myself.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. House number 5 gets us to Leo. Leo is awesome. Most people, I hands down, I think probably like the most fun sign in the zodiac. Most people kind of agree on that. So Leo is fixed fire. It is the sign of kind of creativity and play. It's the sign of the ego. Now, I often have to qualify this too, because ego has one of those negative connotations in English. Like if I say, oh, I meet a person with a lot of Leo and I say, oh, ego is an issue for you. And they immediately check, because they're like, oh, are you saying I'm conceited or full of myself? And it's like, well, maybe, but like what we actually mean when we're talking about Leo ego is purely Freudian ego, right? It's the story that we tell ourselves about the emotions, right? So again, building on the lessons of Cancer. Cancer teaches us that we have an emotional body, but it's not until the Leo section of the chart where we grow up enough to kind of understand like, okay, the emotional body shouldn't be running the show, right? So the Leo is really that time in childhood, early childhood, maybe like up to like preteen years, before you really become too self-conscious, but you start to understand that the moon, right, the emotional body, the Cancer stuff is what makes you vulnerable. And maybe you don't want to show that all the time. So the sun, which rules Leo, this is really when the sun sign traits start to develop for a person. And they develop specifically to protect that more vulnerable moon sign, right? So they work in tandem for the rest of the lifetime. But the sun is most often the more visible part of you. And so that's literally what happens is like, feelings bubble up kind of from the Cancer area of the chart. And then the sun comes in and says, or the Leo, the Leo part of the chart comes in and says, okay, we don't need to worry about that right now. Or, that person was just being a jerk or whatever, right? Whatever the ego tells you. And then it's kind of the trick for the rest of the continuum to be like, do I believe that story? Right? Because the ego lies to us a lot, right? sometimes you are the jerk, right? Sometimes,
Right.
you know, like sometimes you have to actually think to yourself like, oh, okay, am I just telling myself something? Or is it, you know, or is it actually the truth? So Leo is, you know, a lot of celebrities have a lot of Leo in their chart, right? It's very visible. It's very kind of warm and generous, right? Leos are just kind of known for lighting up a room. You can almost always spot a Leo, you know, and you don't know that that's why you're spotting them, but these are the people that just tend to shine naturally. And that really is the job, right? That's the job. It's about uniqueness and showing people like how, you know, this is how I shine without taking anything away from anybody else, right? We all are supposed to be able to shine like this. Leos just set the example kind of
Right.
better than any of the other signs. And then house number 6, we come to Virgo. So Virgo is a sign that's near and dear to me. And it's funny because Virgo is kind of sandwiched between the 2 relationship houses, right? So Leo's all about romance and fun and creativity and play, dating relationships, right? And then when we get up to Libra on the other side of Virgo, we'll talk about marriage and partnership. Virgo's kind of sandwiched in the middle. And so poor Virgo gets this bad reputation of just kind of being like the hermit. And, you know, Virgo is all about schedules and health and wellness and pets and things that we take care of every day. And
Yeah, I feel like they're very practical.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Practical is one of the words that, you know, is one of the buzzwords for Virgo. And so it's not sexy, right? Especially not when you compare it to its neighbors. I'll tell you what though, Virgo is a very, very important sign. You always know somebody who has not mastered their Virgo 6th house lessons, because these are the people who can't adult, right? They can't take care of themselves once they age, you know, and because this is, you know, again, we're talking, you know, the continuum of a human life. So we get to the Virgo area of life, late teens, early 20s, right? We think we're all grown up, and that's kind of when life is like, oh, ha ha ha, let's start paying some bills, let's start you know, like
Right. Yeah.
start, you know. And these are the things that Virgos excel at, right? Making a schedule, time management, you know, making sure I'm eating right, am I getting enough exercise, right? That's not fun, right? It's not fun. But if you don't do this stuff, then you kind of take away your ability to have fun in the other areas of life where you're supposed to have fun, because you're too busy playing catch up all the time. So Virgo is a very important house. Now, I said earlier about how the wheel divides down kind of into 3, into 4, and into 12, obviously. One of the other ways that it divides is straight in half, right? So we've talked so far about the bottom half, which are houses 1 through 6. And then now we'll get to the top half, which are houses 7 through 12. But what I'll note is that this line, right, the bottom half versus the top half, is also very important, because the signs on the bottom, houses 1 through 6, are considered the personal houses. So all of the lessons and things that we've been talking about in houses 1 through 6 so far are all about lessons that we learn by ourselves, right? I have a body, I have stuff, I have a mind, I have feelings, I'm unique, and this is how I take care of myself. Once we flip up to houses 7 through 12, we literally repeat all of the same lessons from houses 1 through 6, only now we're learning them through others. Okay, so the bottom half is self, the top half is transpersonal. Now we're talking about, you know, these same lessons with other people. Virgo, one of the reasons it is so important is because it's that gateway house. And so if you don't master those lessons of Virgo, you're still going to be propelled into the 7 through 12 lessons. You're still going to have to go out there and deal with other people. You're just not going to have as easy a time of it, because you don't have a strong sense of self, right? Aries
Interesting.
is where you start, like, okay, the journey of kind of self-realization, and Virgo's where you finish it. Then we move up to kind of houses 7 through 12. And so if you skip over, you know, the Virgo section because it's boring or whatever, you know, I just want to like fly by the seat of my pants, you know, this is where people end up in like toxic relationships and things like that, because they just, you know, they don't have a firm core self to kind of return back to, right?
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Okay, say if like I don't know if whatever, I'll ask it. So from 7 to 12, like say if you have like your sun sign, I know there's like different signs included, but
Yep.
say if you are born into like 7 through 12, do you have more of a hard time like kind of understanding your own needs almost, or though, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, well, it totally depends, right? So for example, I've charted a lot of people who have a ton of Libra in their chart. Now, Libra is the seventh house. Okay. Libra is, and this perfect segue because we're at the Libra section anyway. Libra actually struggles with this the most. And so that's why it's a good example. Libra is the only sign in the whole zodiac that's not represented by a living thing. Every other sign, the symbol is either an animal or a human, of some sort. Libra is the scales. Libra's all about balance. Libra's all about one-on-one relationships. Now, 99 times out of 100, when we're talking about Libra, we're talking about a committed romantic partnership. So spouse doesn't have to be marriage. It's really the level of commitment that matters. Two people can be in a Libra relationship and never marry each other. But there's tons of other types of Libra relationships too. Doctor patient, lawyer client, priest penitent, right? Technically what you and I are doing right now is a Libra type relationship. Open enemies, right? People who fight each other in court, that's a Libra type relationship. So people who are heavy Libra in their chart are very other oriented, right? That's just the energy that they have. So they're really, really good at going out to people. But if they don't recognize that they have a self that they need to take care of as well, and they constantly spend their life going out to other people, then yes, they can struggle with having that kind of core identity that comes along with houses 1 through 6. It's really a question of what's going on in the other areas of the chart. Are there anchors, right? Are there things, because you can be a Libra sun and have an Aries moon, right? So that person is going to be able to balance out a little bit more than somebody who was born with, say, a Libra sun and moon, right? That person is going to be really heavy Libra. And so the tendency of that person is really going to be, to over focus on the partner, to become codependent, right? To really fix their identity on whomever they're with in a romantic relationship at the time, without actually ever stopping and saying, wait, who am I? Like, what do I want? Right. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it all, right? I've seen all types of presentations and that's, one of the things I go over with people in readings is like, where are the energetic soft spots for you? Like, what do you struggle with? Right. Because, I mean, most people don't need to be reminded of their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are blissfully unaware of their weaknesses because it's impossible to be objective about your own human experience, right? We all just kind of assume that everybody's just like us, but energetically, everybody's different, right? Everybody. Right. And so it's really important to kind of know that. But yeah, so Libra, seventh house, that again, it gets us into kind of the realm of relationships. So, referring back to Aries, Aries being the opposite sign. So Aries is I am, right? This is me. I'm here. I exist. I have a body. Libra is about relating. Okay. Now that I have this body, like, how do I relate it to other people? Right. So that's the kind of tagline of Libra is I relate. So that's house number 7. House number 8. Now we get to Scorpio. Scorpio's fun. So Scorpios.
Are you saying that sarcastically?
Water. No, I actually love Scorpios. When I say fun, that's a little bit sarcastic because Scorpio is kind of anything but fun. Scorpio is very intense, very deep, potentially very dark. But Scorpio is a very highly evolved sign. There is a pretty common belief that souls don't really come in with any type of serious Scorpio influence unless they've been around the Earth school block a few times, because to be a Scorpio is to have an intense life experience. There's almost no way around it. We were talking about Pluto at the beginning. Pluto rules Scorpio. So the intensity is there, right? It's just there. And it's fixed water. So Scorpio is widely considered to be the most powerful sign. Which is interesting if you think about it, because it's a water sign. It's a feminine water sign, right? But it's, like I said, widely considered to be the most powerful. And the reason for that is because it's fixed water, right? So it's the idea of still water runs deep. Scorpios come in with this innate ability to master their emotions, right? Which is something that the rest of the zodiac struggles to do for the entirety of their life, right? Scorpios are just like, yeah, we get it. So when you meet a Scorpio, they're very even keeled, right? They just kind of, and what's funny is, like I said, still water runs deep. So like I always use the analogy of like Loch Ness, right? Like you see this like nice still surface water that doesn't really, there's not a whole hell of a lot going on, but the Loch Ness monster is living under there, right? And God only knows what that monster's doing, right? That's how Scorpios are. They're never going to show you the abyss that exists inside of them emotionally, but it's there. They're super, super sensitive. But if you also kind of, think about a scorpion, like what is a scorpion? A scorpion is this exoskeleton with these giant claws and this crazy stinger, right? It lives in this harsh desert environment. It like spends most of its time under a rock. If you get too close, it comes out, it stings you, and then it goes back under the rock. And it's like a little extra, right? It's like, why all of the drama with the Scorpio? Well, with the scorpion, because inside that exoskeleton is a ball of jelly, right? And they know that without all of this protection that they have, they're just a ball of jelly, right? They're completely vulnerable. Scorpios are very similar, right? They know that on the inside, it's nothing but emotions. And so they have this like kind of hard exterior shell, right? That it's very, very hard to penetrate with a Scorpio. But I mean, my oldest child, my son, is a Scorpio sun and rising. So he's a double Scorpio, and he's easily one of my favorite humans, right? They're so solid, right? They're just so solid and so like, they provide like a very good barometer, especially for Cancers, because we're so like emotionally reactive. And so it's kind of, a lot of times, like if I'm getting like heated, right? Like I'll just kind of think like, okay, what would my son do in this situation? And the answer is always like, he would just chill out. Like that's just what he would do, right? Like he may be mad or whatever, but like he's not gonna show it. And so they, Scorpios are, they're just kind of great for that reason, that they're so even keeled. Scorpio is probably one of the most standoffish signs in the zodiac. And it's, they're just perfectly happy to kind of go through life. I don't want to say alone, because it's not the most, some of them do, but it's not the most fair characterization. It's just that they are very self-contained. They're it's very easy for them to just kind of be like, I'm not going to engage in the drama. They, and the rest, I am in awe of, my Scorpio friends, because I'm just kind of like, I would have popped off so long ago, and they're just kind of like, whatever. But the thing about it is that they're so tolerant, right? Their emotions are so evolved that they're very, very tolerant, because they've kind of been there, done that, seen that, right? But if you manage to piss off a Scorpio to the point where they really get mad at you, they will cut you off like a dead leg, and they will never look back ever, right? Like they are, and the really bad ones can be kind of vengeful on top of it too. It's rare, right? You have to be kind of talking about a very shadowy, but they're, if you push them to the point where they're kind of done with you, you'll never hear from that Scorpio again. Like it's just never going to happen, right? They'll never forgive. They hold grudges. All the water signs kind of have that in common too. Cancers can hold a grudge pretty well too. Okay, where are we? Oh, Sag. Okay. So house number 9, we're getting up into the top quadrant now. Okay. So Sag is mutable fire. It's the last of the fire signs. Sagittarius, again, so we're building on the idea of what did we learn on the other side, right? So Sag is the opposite of Gemini. Now, Gemini, again, we talked about how Gemini is all about information gathering. No discernment, right? Just kind of gathers the information. Virgo is technically where we go to kind of discern and start sorting some of that information that Gemini gathered. Sag is where we go to kind of say, okay, Gemini gathered, 100 pieces of information. Virgo decided that 90 pieces of that information were totally irrelevant to what I'm dealing with right now. So we're going to discard that. And then what Sagittarius does, it's all about the higher mind. So it knits together what's left into belief systems, right? So Sagittarius rules things like, higher education, analogy, long distance travel, things that we do to learn that we could not learn from books, right? You can spend a month reading books about China, right? And learn what it's like to live there. Or you could go spend a month traveling through China and learn I mean, there's no comparison of the way that, there's book learning, which is Gemini, gathering the information. And then there's the kind of learning that happens only through experience. That's really what Sagittarius is all about. So philosophy, religion, all of these kind of higher mind pursuits is what, is what Sagittarius kind of oversees. One of the analogies that I like to use with this particular axis, the Gemini Sag axis, is that you can watch a film there's so many of them, right? Where they talk about, kind of the horrors of the meat industry or fast food, right? Or whatever. And so that's a very Gemini activity, right? Gathering information, watching a documentary on, Super Size Me or whatever. Maybe you then take that information and decide like, oh, you know what? I'm going to become a vegetarian. I don't want to eat like that anymore. Right? So that's the flip, right? That's the difference, right? I took the information that I learned in the Gemini part of my chart, and then I made a decision to adopt a belief system, which is vegetarian, veganism, whatever, right? Based on the information that I gathered. So that's kind of the difference between the kind of lower mind taking in the information and the higher mind saying, okay, I'm going to create a way of life around this idea. And that's what happens with Sag. Capricorn. Okay, so now we're getting up to the pinnacle. Capricorn is the 12 o'clock spot on the chart. Capricorn is the sign, it's cardinal earth. It's the last of the earth signs, so the most evolved earth sign. This is where Capricorn's all about reputation and kind of our pinnacle achievements, right? What are we known for? What are we kind of always going to be looked up to? Again, it's that high point, that 12 o'clock point in the chart. Now, it's a very status conscious sign. A lot of times you'll hear other astrologers refer to it as like the career house. And that's not wrong, but I always like to qualify it by saying even a stay-at-home mother who never works a day in her life and doesn't have a career to speak of still has a 10th house, still has a Capricorn, still has that pinnacle, right? So oftentimes it is the case that our pinnacle achievements in life come through the vehicle of our career, but that's not necessary, right? So that's why I like to kind of say to people that it can be helpful to think of it in terms of career, but that's not the be all end all. It really is, it's about our reputation. It's what are we known for? What is the most visible kind of part of us? And again, referring back to the opposite sign, Cancer and Capricorn oppose each other, right? So Cancer is home, family, kind of who we are in private when nobody's looking, or when only the people that we know and love and trust the most are looking, versus Capricorn, which is who are we when everybody's looking. Now, there may be, ideally there's not a huge variation between the person we are at home and the person we are out in the world. But again, this is just one of the many lessons that comes along with, within the zodiac and within, kind of the whole continuum, is reconciling, who we are at home with who we are out in the world. There are some people who are monsters at home and, they go out into the world and people think that they're the best thing since sliced bread, right? Versus there are people who go out into the world and they seemingly are terrible, they do terrible things, but they really are very nice people and very emotionally solid people, right? So this is again one of the kind of challenges that we all go through as we grow and evolve and become adults, is how do we reconcile the person we are at home with the person we are out in that Capricorn area of life.
Wait, can I ask a question real quick? Because you
please.
made a good point. Not a point, but I've heard that Capricorns and Cancers, they're like direct opposites, right? Well, they're opposing. So like each sign is directly across another one. Are they like opposite, like in terms of qualities and stuff? Are they actually opposites from each other?
So what's interesting is that, yes, so signs that oppose each other 180 degrees, like that's what we call it, right? They oppose each other, which actually sounds a lot worse than it really is. The opposition, so basically, if we talk about the zodiac wheel being the continuum of a human life, each axis, each opposition is actually another continuum, right? So there's 6 different axes and they're all different lessons, right? So we're talking about Cancer Capricorn. This is the axis of responsibility, right? So it is very much a continuation of, here's who I am, here's who I learned to be in my early childhood, and all the subconscious programming, and then hopefully it was good so that when I graduate to the level of having a more public face, the foundation that I built as a child, or that was built for me in my childhood, carries me well, so that, I have a good foundation to stand for, that, so that I can then kind of build bigger foundations in, in the more public sector of my life. Every single one of them, all of the axes deal with that. So it's a continuum. Signs that oppose each other actually have way more in common than they don't, right? I liken it to a coin, okay? You can hold a coin and, you have the head side and the tail side, and the sides face away from each other, but in the middle, it's all the exact same coin, right? Like it's all the same piece of metal. And that's pretty much what signs that oppose each other are like, right? When you get to the poles, when you get to the extreme ends of each sign, they're going to be 180 degrees different, but there's tons of places in the middle to kind of meet. Signs that oppose each other are, they're going to be same polarity, right? So using Cancer, Capricorn as the, as the example, both feminine signs, right? So there's common ground there. Both cardinal signs, there's common ground there, right? So there's, and one is water and one is earth. So they're not the same, but they're compatible, right? So there's so much about opposing signs that actually works well. And opposites attract in astrology. It's very, very, very common to see couples that have opposing sun signs, or like the sun moon, they kind of oppose each other. It really is, it's a binding factor. I see it all the time. Cancer Capricorn is a huge one. I see Cancer Capricorn couples all the time. Okay, so
I think Aquarius.
Okay. Aquarius. Okay, yeah. Yay, my sign. So I'm an Aquarius sun. It's my favorite. I'm very biased. Team Aquarius. Okay, so Aquarius is the 11th house. It is the last of the air signs. It's fixed air, so it's the most evolved of the air signs. Aquarius is like a walking contradiction. Aquarius is a really, really hard sign to explain to people who don't have any heavy Aquarius. We are kind of like the undisputed geniuses of the zodiac, but there is a fine line between genius and insanity, and Aquarius walks that line every single day.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, we are. So like the job of Aquarius, having achieved our pinnacle status, right? Achieving whatever we're going to achieve in the Capricorn area of the chart, we move on to the last two signs, Aquarius and Pisces. And now we're kind of looking towards the future, right? I've done everything that I'm going to accomplish here on the material plane by house 10, by Capricorn. What's next? I don't die until I get to Pisces, right? So I have a little bit of time to play. So Aquarius really is the sign of the future. How do we move and the sign of the collective, right? It's all about, so again, Leo on the other side is me, me, me. Here's how I shine. Aquarius takes that lesson into the transpersonal and says, what's good for everybody, right? Good job, Leo. I'm really psyched that you shine. How do we all shine together to make humanity the best possible, thing that it can be? And so Aquarius's job is hard because, especially now as we transition into the age of Aquarius, it's kind of more important than ever. Our job is to pull humanity into the future. The problem is that humanity, don't fix it if it ain't broke. Humanity doesn't we have to drag everybody kind of kicking and screaming into the future, because they're perfectly happy to kind of sit with something, even if it's stagnating. Aquarius will not allow that to happen. And so, we are considered to be very intelligent, but also very rebellious, very revolutionary. And so it's really common to hear Aquarians kind of be outspoken. And I can't tell you how many times in my life I've been called a conspiracy theorist, right? Tinfoil hat wearing, I get it all the time. And then it's funny because it's like, okay, 2 or 3 years later, my quote unquote conspiracy theory will be the headline story on the news, and everybody will be like, oh, we all saw that coming. And I'm like, you're hilarious. I actually, the Aquarians were the ones that actually saw this coming, and you all are just catching up. The problem is that humanity always catches up to Aquarius, but by the time humanity catches up, Aquarius is on to the next thing. Right. So we're kind of perpetually doomed to be anachronistic, right? We're always going to exist kind of ahead of the curve. And for the most part, we're okay with that, right? Like I have met some Aquarians who are not, they don't do so well with the job of being ahead of the curve. They really want to fit in, but we don't, right? We're terminally unique Aquarians, right? We're not meant to fit in. We being an air sign though, again, and this goes back to like what we were talking about with the Gemini moon, all of the air signs, it's the realm of the mind, it's the realm of the intellect. We are all perceived as detached, right? So Aquarians also get this nasty reputation for being really insensitive, right? Because we tend to bring everything to the realm of logic, everything. We do not do well with feelings. Aquarius is the most humanitarian sign in the zodiac, right? So for people to kind of accuse us of being insensitive and unfeeling is really unfounded, because we care a whole lot. It's just that we care on a much grander scale than all of the rest of the signs. Like all of the rest of the signs are really concerned with kind of the here and now and what's happening with me and you immediately. And Aquarians don't really care about any one person in particular. We care about like the group, right? So it's like, yeah, it really stinks that you're experiencing, whatever hardship you're experiencing, but like, we're kind of that jerk that comes in and is like, but can we kind of like think big picture? Like, can you just get over yourself? Because, you're kind of holding up evolution at this point. Right. So like, and that's that, I mean, it's hard, right? It even sounds insensitive to kind of explain it like that, but it's really not that we don't care. It's just that we care in a very different way, and we really just don't do well in the realm of feelings. Like we just don't belong there, right? We don't do well. And then last but not least, we have Pisces. So Pisces, house 12, is the spot on the continuum where the soul kind of transcends, right? The body dies, the soul kind of goes back to source, and then it's this kind of rabbit hole. God only knows what happens. And then eventually the idea being that we reincarnate, recycle, we come back and we start over again in a new Aries body, right? Pisces is the most evolved of the signs. It carries, like I said, a little bit of all the rest of the signs ahead of it. It is a sign of service, the axis of service actually with Virgo. So Virgo is on the self side. It's about the service to self. I make schedules, I feed myself, I do this, I do that. Pisces is about service to the collective, right? So it's about charity and kind of, taking care of your fellow man. And Pisces is the ultimate in compassion energy. Pisces souls, they have a tough time, right? I mean, there's another belief that kind of no new soul ever evolves with any serious, or never ever incarnates with any serious Pisces influence, because newer souls wouldn't be able to handle it, right? Pisces, it's the spot on the continuum, like I said, where the soul, where the body goes to die and the soul kind of transcends, right? So there's a dissolution that has to happen there. So Pisces energy, Neptune rules Pisces, and Neptune dissolves everything it touches, right? That's the job. The potential downside though is that no matter what, like that dissolution that happens is perfectly fine when we're talking about the body dying and the soul needing to transcend. That's what's supposed to happen. But the problem is that everything dissolves in Pisces, everything. And so Pisces people are just sponges, right? They are like psychic sponges for energy. They're known for being very sleepy, right? For just kind of being very like tired and wistful and just, and it's literally because they lack the ability to put energetic boundaries up around themselves. They can try, right? Pisces are usually aware of the fact that they need boundaries. They just, they can't put them up, right? Or they can try, but the Neptune influence just will dissolve it. So right. What I often advise people with heavy Pisces is that they have to, they just have to be really careful. The need to escape for a Pisces person is very, very real. And so they need to, they need to escape, but they need to be mindful of the type of escapist behavior that they engage in, right? So there's healthy ways to escape and there's not healthy ways to escape. I've worked with many, many Pisces people who battle addiction. They escape through drugs, they escape through alcohol. I've talked to Pisces people who can't make it through a day without a nap. Some of them get into codependent relationships. Others are, amazing musicians, right? They all find ways to escape. It's just a question of, how healthy are those ways that you escape, and, how effective are they? Because it's not optional, right? It's funny because when I work on with Pisces people, I have to say, I don't tell this to any other client, but if you have a heavy Pisces influence, I will tell you, honor your need to escape. Every other sign, all the other 11 signs, I'm like, face your crap, right? But with Pisces, I'm like, no, it's okay, go take a nap. Every sign has that kind of one unique thing, that's just unique to that sign. And that's kind of the thing for Pisces, is that they they have no boundaries. They absorb everything. They are the ultimate in compassion. But that's an exhausting existence, right?
But we're like an hour, like we're half an hour over.
I know, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I should have told you I could talk.
Okay, no, it's okay. You're a lawyer. I should have figured, but I'm just kidding.
No, it's true. You're totally right.
But I don't know if you wanted to like do another session where we can talk about the different planets.
Sure.
Listen next week to learn more about the astrological planets and houses and what they mean and what even is astrology part 2. If you're interested in learning more about yourself or your birth chart, you can book a birth chart reading with Jessica on her website at MsFortuneAstrology.com. That is MsFortuneAstrology.com. You can also find her on Instagram at MsFortune1111. That is MsFortune1111. Or like her Facebook page and check out her YouTube channel at MsFortune Astrology. And if you missed any of that, don't worry. I put it all in the episode description for you. Thank you for listening to the What Even Is podcast. If you like this episode, please share and subscribe. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at What Even Is podcast so you can DM us a topic that makes you wonder, what even is that?